A Trip into the Darkness. Chapter 36. The sunlight shining on her face awoke Mallory from her slumbers. She felt groggy and hungover from the drugs Troy had given her. Terror squished her heart and her eyes flew open as she sat straight up in the bed. She was in her old bedroom on the island. How had that happened? Looking around, she found Andres sitting at the floor at the foot of her bed, staring out the window at the sunrise. His hair was a mess on top of his head, and stubble on his face was a little thicker. He looked so tired, she thought, as she tried to remember what happened and how she had gotten back. "You lied to me," he whispered as he kept staring out the window. Mallory pulled her legs to her chest. "I didn't lie, but you didn't give me a choice," she said, willing him to turn his head and look at her. "You seduced me. Then you are just going to leave me with like it meant nothing." His face was blank and his voice devoid of emotion. Mallory bit her bottom lip, fighting against the pain bubbling in her heart and the tightening of her chest. That's what she did. Slept with men and then leave before they have a chance to get attached. Yet somehow in the brief time they had been together, they had both become enamored with each other before they had sex. To her, their sex had meant more than just fucking and had bordered upon lovemaking, something she had never experienced. He had somehow made her feel seen and heard. He made her feel crazy with lust, along with feeling sexy and womanly whenever she was around him. Sitting on the bed, feeling his energy rolling around her, she wanted nothing more than to go to him so she could crawl into his lap. She wanted to touch him and have him touch her back. But she had broken that closeness between them by running away. Even if it wasn't broken, the necklace at her throat was cold and angry with her for failing. She could hear it whispering that they had to try again. There was no time to waste. Tears filled Mallory's eyes as she kept looking at him, begging in her mind for him to turn his head and meet her eyes. She didn't want him to be angry with her, but he had to understand she didn't have a choice. Even if she loved him, she could never stay, and that fact broke her heart. "I didn't want to leave you, Andres, but this thing around my neck isn't going to let me stay with you." She hoped he could understand the truth. Her life was out of her control and no longer belonged to her. It hadn't been her own life since the moment Troy Denhart walked into Marcy's diner and pub. He finally looked away from the window to stare at her face. When he saw tears, his jaw clenched and his fists clenched. "Baby girl, why didn't you tell me that it was bothering you? We'll figure out a solution," he said, and it looked like he was holding himself back from moving closer to her. "I didn't tell you because it's not your responsibility to try and take care of me. I got myself into this situation, so I'll figure it out. Besides, we've only known each other for a few short days," she told him as she reached up to wipe away the wetness on her cheeks. Andre stood up from the bed and moved closer to her before falling to his knees on the soft floor. He took her hand in his and kissed it, then rubbed her hand against his cheek. Mallory felt herself start to pant. Looking at his face, she noticed his eyes were darker and lacking the beautiful gold within. He also had dark circles under his eyes that made him look exhausted and strung out. "I thought you said you wouldn't need to feed for another month," she rasped, brushing her fingers through the black stubble on his face. "You caused my body a lot of distress with that poison, along with running away," he said before he averted his gaze away from her. Mallory moved her hands so she could tug him onto the bed. Understanding what she wanted, he stood up and sat beside her. Putting her hands on his chest, she pushed him down so he's laying on his back. Slowly, she lowered her face to his and kissed him. Tightness built in her tummy as his hands moved to her ass and started squeezing. Breaking the kiss, she looked back into his eyes and asked, "How long were you out from the drugs that I gave you?" "Girl said you had been gone for roughly 5 minutes when you woke me up with a glass of cold water to the face." Mallory's body jerked, and she blinked her eyes in confusion. 5 minutes? I gave you the entire vial. When I tried that stuff, I only took a few drops, and I was out for almost an entire day. Andres shrugged his shoulders while staring into her eyes with his dark ones. She missed the amber light that shined from within them whenever he was well fed. The idea of another female, or even a male, giving him what he needed was upsetting, and made her mouth hurt from violence. She didn't want him to be fed by another, and found that she wanted to be the one to take care of him like he had taken care of her. "Let me feed you, Andres." His lip tugged up at one side. "If you do that, you will complete our imprint." Mallory leaned back from him and raised her eyebrows. "Our what?" she asked. "We are bonded, Blue Eyes. I knew it from the moment you latched onto my neck. You marked me with your scent, making me undesirable to other females, because I smell like you. If I were to bite you, I'd be doing the same. We would become mates if you let me feed from you." Mallory stared into his eyes after he was finished speaking. She had read a plethora of romance novels where the author would talk about fated mates. Lying across his chest and looking into his eyes, she could see herself being happy with a mate like Andres. She did not know what it meant to be imprinted, but she liked the idea of it. A companion she could talk to and discuss things with. A man who would stand by her side. Maybe then she wouldn't have to keep doing everything alone. Maybe if Andres became her mate, he would help her figure out what to do about the damn necklace wrapped around her throat. "Okay, let's do it then," she told him, feeling slightly nervous and turned on because he was about to bite her. Reaching up, he wrapped his fist around a handful of her hair and twirled it around his fingers. "Are you sure? We can always wait if you want." "I'm sure. I want you to be well fed. That way you can, in turn, feed me and give me the other things that my body needs," she told him as she reached down to brush her fingers across his lovely face. As she watched, his top canine slowly extended into sharp daggers within his mouth. He also had 2 longer teeth extend on his lower jaw, creating 4 sharp daggers, perfect for puncturing skin. Mallory took in their differences. Whenever her teeth lengthened, it was all the teeth in her mouth that became sharp like knives, fashioned for shredding flesh versus simply puncturing it. She assumed it had something to do with her demon heritage. Her extended teeth were also not as long as Andreas's canines whenever hers came out. She made a mental note to ask him about that someday. Reaching down, she grabbed his other hand that was not yet in her hair and brought it up to her head. As he brought his mouth to her neck, she tensed. When he started kissing and suckling her throat, she relaxed and leaned into him before he bit her. His bite was nothing like Troy's. Andres pulled at her throat, causing butterflies to fill her stomach, and she felt euphoria and lust. Pleasure coursed through her body as she drank deeply. Reaching down, she pulled at the zipper on his pants. When it unlatched, she unzipped him and reached for his hard length. When she started stroking him, he released her neck and licked the wound. "Why did you stop?" she asked him in a breathless voice as she looked down at him. The half-smile tugging at his face was so attractive and made her feel giddy. "Because, baby girl, I want my mouth on other places," he told her before grabbing her face and pulling her in for a passionate kiss. Tilda. They spent a ravishing morning in bed where Andres took her body in many different positions, and Mallory experienced the top tier of ecstasy. Lifting her head from his chest, she stared at his handsome face. He had told her in between their lovemaking that he had given Sophia the morning off. This meant she didn't have to feel bad about skipping breakfast to spend the entire morning exploring his glorious body. Currently, his eyes were closed, and a small smile tugged at his full lips as he used one of his hands to play in her hair, twisting her wavy locks around his long fingers. Her body was rapturous and a little sore in all the right places. "What do your tattoos mean?" she asked him. He had a few other black swirls and designs on his torso and chest that she had spent the morning admiring and licking. "The bird on my hand is a cardelius. They were my mother's favorite. When we moved to Colombia, she brought a pair with us and released them at our family's estate." He opened his eyes and stared off into the space like he was remembering them. It made sense now why he had picked cardelius birds to populate his island. "The plant on my hand is a coca plant, while in bloom. After the rush of the sugar and tobacco slowed down and was capitalized, coca became one of my biggest profitable plants and still remains my biggest profit to this day." Mallory stared at the ink on his chest and asked, "What about your others?"
Just random art that my sister thought I needed. Alina was really into tattooing for a while, until she became bored of it, like the many other things in her life. She also did all the tattoos on our brother, Adon. His work is a lot like mine, only more colorful.
My brother Lance also has a lot of tattoos. I think he thought they were cool when he was younger. I've thought about getting some, but I've never had the money or time to invest in them. Mallory told him as she reached up to trace the intricate designs on his strong chest.
Do you have any other family in the States?
He asked, and Mallory felt a longing inside of herself. She missed her brother and wished she had more family to speak of, but she didn't. She felt almost jealous that Andres still had a few siblings and an aunt, uncle, and cousins. She wanted that for herself. Nope, just me and my brother. He's a few years older than me. Our mom died when I was 17, and I've never known my father.
I'm sorry, Mallory. I know how hard it is to lose a parent.
Andres told her and moved the hand that was playing in her hair to caress her face. Andres, how did you get me back from Troy? Is he dead? She had wanted to ask him that question as soon as she woke up, but had gotten distracted by his body and blood.
Do you wish him to be dead?
He asked. His question was curious and light. Mallory thought about it for a time. She still considered him to be a psychopath, and she resented him for abusing her and changing her against her will. Then there was the fact that he had drugged her and abused her, but she didn't think she wanted him dead. He was only doing what he considered was his right as an immortal being. He had changed her into a monster, and he didn't know how to handle her. However, if he hadn't done those things, then she would never have met Andres or be here on his beautiful island. I don't think so, she answered truthfully and waited for his answer. Nodding, he told her,
I set up roadblocks after he abducted you. Then when I found him, I told him you were my mate and I wanted you back. He told me to stop all shipments of my product into the U.S., then gave me the keys to uncuff you.
While Andres talked, his body tensed, and she could feel the anger rolling off of him. Reaching up to touch his face, she ran her fingers over his strong brow, then dragged them down his jaw. It's crazy that he let me go that easily, after all that time he spent chasing me down. When we were in the car together before I passed out, he tried to talk trash on you for being a bad man, and I told him you were a better man than he, Mallory stated, but Andres didn't smile like she was expecting him to.
I am bad if you consider all the terrible things I have done in my life and the number of people I have killed.
Mallory sat up from his chest and looked out the bay windows. The sun was high in the sky. I'm a bad person, too, with that logic. I don't even remember how many people I killed on my trip through Mexico, but I know it was a lot. I tried to justify it in my head at the time, but I know most of the people I murdered were innocent and didn't deserve to die. Mallory felt Andres sit up beside her before he brought his mouth to her shoulder and started kissing her sensitive flesh.
Let us take a shower and get dressed. We cannot dwell on the past, but only move forward with the future, with better intentions and actions,
he told her as he continued to massage her back. Nodding, Mallory pushed the covers off her naked body and stood up. Andres quickly followed her out of bed and picked her up in her arms to carry her to the bathroom. She laughed as he walked them into the shower, setting her down to turn on the water. Standing under the hot spray with him at her back, while his hands wandered up and down her body, she felt a wave of anger and venom shoot through her, originating from the amulet at her neck.
Your debt has not been paid, Mallory. You will still take me to the Amazon River. There is no way for you to get out of this.
Mallory let out a scream and jerked within Andres' arms as her hands flew up to try and rip at the necklace that started scolding her. She could feel her flesh burning as the thing seared her skin and shot pain throughout her entire body. She would have fallen to the floor if Andres' strong arms hadn't been wrapped around her. When the thing finally stopped burning her and the pain wrecking her body eased, she blinked away tears to find Andres' face close to hers.
What happened, baby girl? What did it do?
He asked her with his eyes glued to her neck. Gingerly, she reached up to touch her burning flesh. The necklace had returned to its icy cold form around her throat. It threatened me and told me there was no way to get out of giving it what it wants, she whispered, while looking into Andres's golden brown eyes. His jaw was clenched and a frown pulling at his brows. "We are going to find a way to get that thing off of you," he stated before reaching down to turn off the water. "Can't we just go to the river and give it what it wants?" she asked, following him out of the shower stall. He had a towel already opened and wrapped it around her body. "No. That thing is evil, and if we give it to what it wants, it'll only serve to bring more malice into the world. It could want to open a portal and release even more evil. And it could want to use you as a living sacrifice. We don't know, and I will not be gambling with your life by dragging you to such a terrible place in the world." Andres's voice was stern and his face was hard as he turned and left the bathroom. Mallory stood there biting her lip as she wondered what she was going to do. She settled on doing her hair and getting dressed. After that, they could discuss what was next.